Scene script. Have you ever wondered how the United States came to be? It all started with the establishment of the 13 colonies. Our story begins in the early 17th century, when English settlers made their first permanent home in what is now known as the United States. The year was 1607, and the place was Jamestown, Virginia. This colony, the first of the 13, was established primarily for the purpose of economic expansion. As more settlers made the journey across the Atlantic, additional colonies were established. The motivations behind these settlements varied. Some, like the New England colonies of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, were founded by those seeking religious freedom. Maryland and Pennsylvania were also significantly motivated by founders' concerns related to the practice of religion. Other colonies, however, were established for different reasons. New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and the southern colonies of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were all founded with economic expansion in mind. These colonies were established on land once claimed by the Dutch colony of New Netherland. It's fascinating to consider how this patchwork of colonies, each with its own unique motivations and characteristics, would eventually come together to form a united front. Despite their differences, they shared commonalities in political, constitutional, and legal systems, and each was largely dominated by Protestant English speakers. Over the course of 150 years, the population of these colonies grew from a mere 2,000 to a staggering 2.4 million, a growth that was not without its consequences. These settlers displaced Native Americans and built their wealth on a system of slavery, which was legal in all of the colonies. Despite the challenges and conflicts they faced, the 13 colonies managed to maintain a high degree of self-governance and active local elections. They resisted London's demands for more control, setting the stage for the conflicts that would eventually lead to the American Revolution. From a handful of settlers in Jamestown to a network of colonies stretching down the Atlantic coast, the 13 colonies were the seed from which the United States grew. The 13 colonies weren't just about politics and religion. They were vibrant communities where people lived, worked, and built a new life. In these colonies, life was a blend of cultures, traditions, and beliefs, shaped by settlers from different parts of the world. The diversity was reflected in their lifestyles, from the austere Puritan ethics in New England to the easygoing plantation culture in the South. The economy was as varied as the people. New England's rocky terrain and harsh weather led to smaller farms and a focus on fishing, shipbuilding, and commerce. The middle colonies, with their fertile soil, became the breadbasket, supplying wheat and other grains. The southern colonies, blessed with a warm climate and fertile land, became the hub of tobacco, rice, and indigo production. Life in the colonies wasn't easy, though. The population saw a dramatic increase, from a mere 2,000 to a whopping 2.4 million in 150 years. This growth, however, came at a price. Native Americans were displaced, their lands taken over by the settlers. A dark chapter in the life of these colonies was the institution of slavery. Legal in all 13 colonies, slavery was especially prevalent in the South, where large plantations required a significant labor force. People were brought from Africa and the Caribbean, stripped of their freedoms, and forced into a life of servitude. Despite these harsh realities, the colonies thrived. They developed their own political systems, held local elections, and gradually began to resist British control. The colonies were no longer just settlements. They were becoming a community, a nation in the making. Yet life wasn't all work and struggle. There were moments of joy, of celebration. There were barn raisings, harvest festivals, and town fairs. Music, dance, and storytelling were integral parts of colonial life, adding color and vibrancy to the people's existence. Despite the challenges and conflicts, the 13 colonies thrived, laying the groundwork for the nation that would eventually become the United States. But not everything was smooth sailing. Tensions were brewing between the 13 colonies and the British government. In the mid-18th century, the French and Indian War erupted, pitting Britain and its colonies against the French and their Native American allies. This 7-year conflict, while ultimately ending in British victory, laid the foundation for the discord that would follow. The war left Britain with a hefty war debt and a sprawling new empire to manage. To offset these burdens, the British government decided that the colonies should bear a part of the cost. This led to a series of new taxes and regulations that the colonists found onerous and unjust. Simultaneously, the war altered the dynamics between Britain and its colonies. The shared struggle against a common enemy fostered a sense of unity among the disparate colonies, and they began to collaborate more closely. Colonial printers and newspapers played a crucial role in this growing intercolonial communication, sharing news and spreading ideas that fostered a collective colonial identity. The colonies, each with their unique characteristics, were nonetheless united in their resistance to the British government's increasing control. They were used to a high degree of self-governance, with active local elections and minimal interference from the mother country. When Britain began to tighten its grip, the colonies pushed back. They resisted the new taxes and regulations, arguing that, as Englishmen, they were entitled to certain rights, including the right not to be taxed without their consent. This principle of no taxation without representation became a rallying cry for the colonists. It encapsulated their grievances against the British government and their demand for greater autonomy. The seeds of revolution were sown, and before long, they would sprout into full-blown rebellion. As the saying goes, no taxation without representation. This became a rallying cry for the colonists, setting the stage for the American Revolution. The tension finally erupted into open conflict with the start of the American Revolution. The 13 colonies, united by their shared grievances against the British Crown, formed the Continental Congress in 1774. This assembly, meeting in Philadelphia, served as the de facto government of the colonies. They took a bold step in appointing George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, a unified force to resist British rule. The American Revolutionary War, which lasted from 1775 to 1783, was a series of battles and maneuvers, punctuated by key events that turned the tide in favor of the colonies. The first significant victory came with the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, a turning point that boosted the morale of the colonists and convinced France to enter the war as an ally. The alliance with France was pivotal. Their naval support blocked British reinforcements during the decisive Battle of Yorktown in 1781. This victory effectively ended the major military operations of the war. But it was not until 2 years later, in 1783, with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, that the war officially ended. The Treaty of Paris recognized the sovereignty of the United States. In this agreement, Britain acknowledged the colonies' independence, ceding vast tracts of territory to the new nation. The 13 colonies had fought and won their freedom. They were no longer subjects of the British Crown, but citizens of a new republic. The American Revolution was not just a war for independence. It was a revolution of ideas, a radical reimagining of governance, and a bold assertion of the rights of individuals. It was a war that birthed a nation and forever altered the course of world history. With the aid of France and other allies, the 13 colonies emerged victorious, gaining their independence and sovereignty. This was a monumental achievement, a victory against overwhelming odds. It was the beginning of a new era, the dawn of the United States of America. From the ashes of war, a new nation was born. The American Revolutionary War, a struggle that had spanned 8 long years, had finally come to an end. British armies were defeated, and with French aid, the 13 colonies had managed to gain their sovereignty. This was formally acknowledged in the Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783. This treaty marked the end of British rule and the beginning of something entirely new. The 13 colonies were no longer just colonies. They were a nation that was born out of a shared desire for freedom and self-governance. They had fought together, bled together, and now they would build together. The same year, delegates from each of the 13 states gathered in Philadelphia for the Second Continental Congress. Here, they took the monumental step of adopting the Declaration of Independence, a document that would serve as the bedrock of the new nation's ideals and principles. Penned by Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed that all men are created equal.